you want to be inspired by extraordinary courage and real life stories? Well, you've come to the right place. Welcome, everyone, to a good place where truth and integrity meet, where I'll be introducing you to today's thought-provoking and compelling premier whistleblowers, educators, authors, journalists, humanitarians, and celebrities, and they all have one thing in common. They are people of truth and integrity, and many are considered modern-day heroes. And along with my co-host, Mr. Kev Baker from The Kev Baker Show here on TFR. And I have another one of these incredibly interesting and compelling guest. His name is Mr. John Greenewald. And so I'm going to get to John's bio here. He's had a fascinating life. I mean, from a very young age, from what I can tell. And it says here that he is the creator of the Black Vault, a well-known resource for declassified government documents. And the information you'll find on there, you won't believe. But after viewing this site, you will see undeniable, irrefutable evidence-based documents. John's efforts throughout the decades of research have been responsible for getting hundreds of thousands of pages that have never seen the light of day into the public domain. He has appeared on numerous television and radio programs throughout the world and is frequently sourced in various news articles and stories for his archive and his discoveries. The Black Vault is the largest privately run online repository of declassified government documents anywhere in the world, with more than 2 million pages of documents to read on nearly every government secret imaginable. The Black Vault is known worldwide for getting down to the truth and nothing but. So welcome, John. I appreciate you coming on, agreeing to the interview.
Well, it's my pleasure. It's good to be here. Thank you.
And hi, Kev. Thank you for coming on and co-hosting with me today.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. I'm going to be sitting here on the edge of my seat. I'm a bit of a fanboy, Ella. I've been a big fan of John's work for some time, so I'm really looking forward to this.
I appreciate that, Kev. Thank you.
So, John, how did you take an interest in this world, and when did your curiosity lead you down to this path of government secrets and the unknown?
Well, it started more than 22 years ago now when I was 15 years old. And to be honest with you, I never thought, well, I'm going to investigate this, for the rest of my life and do hardcore research with the Freedom of Information Act. I didn't even know what the Freedom of Information Act was. And so I looked online, and this was 1996. So the internet was a much different world than it is now. And the short of it is, even then, when you search UFO, you get, hundreds of thousands of pages. Now it's literally like 8 or 10 million come up, literally. And you just get all these different stories. And I was intrigued by the topic, but you would read, let's say, different articles and even books and so on, and you would get these different facts. And somebody would say that their version is right. And then you'd read somebody else and they say their version is right. And it was just a mess. And so I learned about this thing called the Freedom of Information Act. Read a 4-page government document on the internet. There was like really nothing when it came to, government records online, at least not much. And I came across this 4-page government document that detailed what's known as the 1976 Iran incident. And I'm telling you, it read like an X-Files episode. And at the age of 15, that was it. I was hooked. The website said, if you don't think this is real, which to be honest with you, I didn't, it said you can use this form letter. It's called a Freedom of Information Act request, sign your name, and send it off. And there was this agency that was called the Defense Intelligence Agency. I had no idea even what that was. I'm like, sure, yeah, it's free. So I printed it out, signed my name. I was, in high school. Anybody's going to send me something for free, I'm all over it. And I sent it away. And sure enough, about a month later, I got this 4-page government document in the mail. It was absolutely real. I was hooked, and I went back on the internet, tried to find more websites that had information like this, and there weren't any. I mean, again, this was 1996, so the internet was a much different world. So I sat down, started filing FOIA requests, collecting documents, and I built that website that I was looking for and called it the Black Vault, and here we are 22 years later and still going at it. Didn't think I would, but here I am.
And now, but it seems like there's a curiosity that seems to be insatiable at this point for this type of information. And I don't know if it has to do with Edward Snowden or some of these other whistleblowers, but people are hungry for this stuff.
They really are. I'm fascinated by just the fact that we don't know what the UFO phenomena is. I do use the plural. I think there's multiple facets to the phenomena in UFOs, whatever it ultimately is. But I started because I was impatient. And, this teenager that was just starting to use the FOIA, I was impatient. So I started researching while I was waiting for UFO documents to come in the mail because the government is not quick. There
Because
are a
that was
lot of
your
things.
initial interest, right?
That
The
was my initial
UFOs?
interest,
Yeah.
yeah. But then you get bored just waiting because the government is absolutely sluggish when it comes to the FOIA. So I started firing off requests on all sorts of things. I'm a big history buff. I love World War II. So I'm filing all these FOIA requests and getting all these documents. And at the end of the day, I was realizing that there is a lot of stuff, UFO related and not, that the U.S. government and the U.S. military does not want us to know. But the Freedom of Information Act was starting to get me documents that, in some cases, had never seen the light of day before. Documents declassified for no other reason other than I was able to get them requested, reviewed, and declassified through the Freedom of Information Act. That is one of the best feelings in the world. And yes, I do geek out about it. But when you open an envelope, let's say from the CIA, and you open that envelope and there are documents in there that just got declassified because of your request, and no one outside of the CIA or had the clearance to see the document, no one has seen it in the general public. It is one of the coolest feelings in the world. And after 22 years, it has never gotten old.
So, but one thing I want to ask you about. So in the process of submitting so many FOIAs, the government quickly became aware of you. Is that correct? I heard that in one of your interviews.
Yeah, they did. And
how did you know?
Well, because my father worked for Rocketdyne, which he worked on the space shuttle for quite a long time, more than 20 years. Well, more than 20 years. And he's retired now. But when I started this, I needed to make sure that there was a separation between my dad, who he tells me he doesn't have a clearance, but some of the other things that were not space shuttle related, I question it. But hey, he's a patriot. He has never divulged anything to me. I don't believe he has a clearance, but he was still worried that here I was, requesting this information. Well, the government started receiving letters from John Greenewald in Northridge, California. Well, there is a John Greenewald in Northridge, California that works for Rocketdyne, and that would be my dad at the time. So I needed to start putting copies of my student ID from high school in my FOIA requests. So they knew that I was not the same. I'm known, I don't want to say professionally, but I'm known on the internet as John Greenewald Jr. I'm actually not a junior. The only reason that was adopted was because, again, I didn't want there to be a confusion with my dad, because that was the last thing I wanted, even as a punk teenage kid looking to see how many government secrets I could pry loose. I didn't want, any blowback on him. So that's why that adopted. And yeah, I was getting calls from the FBI. My mother, I remember I was at school, and the FBI had called in regards to one of my requests and asked for John Greenewald. And she said, no, he's at work, thinking that it was for my dad, and went to take a message, and it said, they said, this is so-and-so from the FBI. And she went, oh, you mean my son? He's in school. And I think the other side just kind of went, wait, what? There was some confusion there because not a whole lot of teenagers were using the Freedom of Information Act. So in that respect, there was a little bit of knowledge, some good and some bad, about what I was doing. One quick, very short story is I got an email one time from the Pentagon, and the guy asked for anonymity, so I won't give his name, but he proved to me who he was. He told me about letters that only myself and the Pentagon knew. And he had retired, and he says, I've watched your FOIA request come in since you were 15. And at first we were all fascinated. And he said, but some of the people in the office, they became very frustrated, and they would see your name come in, and legally they had to respond. They couldn't just shred it or anything. Mm-hmm. But he said that they got frustrated. He said that they were tired because I didn't take their standard answers, and they had a lot of standard answers to give. And through the FOIA, I would push back, not rudely, but very professionally and legally, and I wouldn't take it. And he said he got tired of that bureaucracy, and he retired. And so his overall gist of what he wanted to tell me, and I'll never forget it, he said, keep at it, kid. And that's what he told me probably about 20 years ago now. And that's what I've done. I've never given up. And he saw it. He worked on the inside, and he saw what was going on, and he saw the frustration. So back to your question, not to make it long-winded. Yeah, they knew who I was. And I think that in many respects, they were frustrated that I wasn't taking what I call in my book, the company line. I was pushing, and I would not take that company line answer.
Okay. And because you cover so many topics, I don't even know where to begin. One thing that really interests me is military and defense and maybe some experimentation because that is fascinating to me. And it's horrifying when I first found out that it was a history of experimentation. So I'd like to kind of cover maybe kind of some of the topics along those lines. And then, of course, science is fascinating to me. And I don't know I don't see too much about DARPA, but that is an agency I'm very curious and interested in.
Yeah.
And and before we get into that, can you tell me, in your opinion, your educated opinion, which agency do you think holds the most secrets?
That's a tough one because it depends on what topic. To be honest with you, it's hard to say. Obviously, the big three for me would be the CIA is definitely top of the list. The NSA is on the top of the list, and the Defense Intelligence Agency I think is also on the top of the list. But they all have their positive notes because I do want to say positive notes. But the other way to answer it is they all have their downsides too, and that unfortunately is the reality of it. They all have secrets, regardless of quote unquote classifications. I do think that a lot of agencies, even though information is considered unclassified, a lot of times they want to hold that onto that too, and they don't want to give it out. So it's a hard question to answer, but definitely my big three is the CIA, the NSA, and the DIA.
Hmm. Yeah, I've interviewed some CIA agents. Like I interviewed John Kiriakou, who's also a whistleblower, and he's told me unbelievable stories as well. And those were his experiences. I don't know if you're familiar with him. And then I've spoken to Kevin Shipp. Kevin Shipp has interviewed me. Another interesting, very difficult experiences he had because of his whistleblowing and what he went through. So there's just too much evidence out there, and there's very honorable people coming forward talking about some of the things that go on in these agencies. And I get emails every day from people who suspect certain things, including like experimentation. Does it still exist now? It makes me wonder. I know that there was a Tuskegee. Oh, that's one thing I wanted to get into. I'm going to refer to the Tuskegee experiments where they dosed unwitting citizens with LSD, and that was shocking to me that went on. And then I heard in one of your interviews you were talking about how the CIA was trafficking drugs in Los Angeles, even.
Yeah, now the Tuskegee experiments was syphilis.
Syphilis. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. The other big one though is MKUltra, which was the LSD, and that is what I've focused on a lot with the mind control experiments. And I think sadly there's this aura that once Hollywood makes a movie out of something, and what they did with the mind control stuff, I actually didn't see it, and I wanted to see it. Not for informational purposes, but just entertainment, which was the one that George Clooney was in. I'm drawing a blank. Men Who Stare at Goats. That's what it was. And, they pull in all this kind of crazy fringe research that the CIA did. And sadly, I think with society as a whole, that the moment Hollywood makes a movie out of it, it kind of diminishes the reality that they really did stuff like that. I mean, obviously, they dramatized it in that movie. They made it comedic. It made it funny and so on and so forth. But they were really doing these experiments, these mind control experiments. And it came out years after they did it. They had a Senate hearing. And now I'm focusing on MKUltra itself. There's a lot of human experimentation. But to stick with that one real quick, there was a congressional hearing that once Congress was tipped off that the CIA was undergoing these MKUltra experiments. And MKUltra was just the tip of the iceberg. They had many other programs like MK Delta, MK Naomi, quite a few other experiments that all kind of tied into that. But that being said, they destroyed most of that information. There was a congressional hearing. They brought in a lot of people for testimony. But sadly, a lot of that history is destroyed. And it took me about 20 years ago, I got all of the quote unquote remaining MKUltra documents from the CIA. There were quite a few of us that were requesting it, and they finally had released it. I had dumped it all online way back in, I think it was about 2000, 2001 when I had received it. Fast forward to about 2.5 years ago, and the CIA was giving the false impression that this was everything. They offered an index to these 4 CD-ROMs. And I don't want to take credit for this. There was a researcher who grabbed what I had dumped on the internet and meticulously went through tens of thousands of pages and lined them up with this index of all the document numbers. And he spit out a list of a couple hundred missing documents. And it took me about 2.5 years of fighting under FOIA. And thanks to this researcher, I had the missing document numbers. About November of last year, I finally received them. And it is a very long story, which I won't bore you with all of it. But the short of it is, with these documents, it proved beyond any shadow of a doubt that MKUltra was absolutely the tip of the iceberg. The CIA claimed to me that the documents had been out before, and I don't believe it. Within the documents, you could actually prove in the 50s, in the 60s, they were implanting chips into the brains of dogs, and actually were successful in remote controlling these dogs with these, these brain implants. Now, this was in the 50s and 60s. We're not talking about 10 years ago or 5 years ago. If you really sit and think about how that successful test happened 50, 60 years ago.
70.
Yeah. I mean,
60, 70, yeah.
And we don't know when they stopped, because a lot of the documents were destroyed. But fast forward now to, 2019, what else do they got? If they were successful then, what's going on now? Mm-hmm. So these documents were huge. And these obviously were the precursor programs that led into humans. I mean, I'm an animal lover. I hate hearing about this, but it is a harsh reality that when they start experimentation like this, they do it with animals first. You can even look at the space program. They shot a monkey up there before a human, so they experiment with animals before they transition to humans. So you look at those documents, and it does send chills up your spine when you realize, can they remote control a human in 1960, And if they could, or if they were very close to it, what can they do in 2019? And that does lead into DARPA. And I don't know if you want to get into that now, but it's a scary world when you look at the reality of what really happened.
Horrifying. Go ahead, Kev.
Yeah, before you take it to DARPA, Ella, it's interesting you say there how they know how to manipulate us. And to backtrack to what you were saying about the men that stare at goats, it's a perfect example, John, because I think they do this a lot. Be it MKUltra, be it anything they're really trying to cover up, but the lids come off. They'll hide it in a Hollywood movie. And you're so correct, because people after that, they just roll their eyes if we talk about any of this being real and say, oh, come on, you got that from the movie. You can watch too many movies now. And I definitely think you'll know yourself, there's the Pentagon connection to Hollywood with their media wing and everything else. And for me, it's a deliberate tactic to try and almost take some of the almost to combat some of the information yourself and others bring forward.
Yeah, it's to diminish the truth. I really believe that, because, again, most of society, not a lot, probably not your audience, obviously, but a lot of society, they get their news from like the Kardashians. I mean, I hate to make light of it, but a lot of people do. And if they read it on the internet, well, it has to be true. And they start just kind of not paying attention to what's real and what's entertainment, and it all kind of blurs together. And I think that that's a tactic in a way for cover-ups, where, if you allow Hollywood, leak it to Hollywood, make it a story and dramatize it, the moment that happens, society does just fall back to, it was just a Hollywood plot. Oh no, that was a movie. Oh no, that was a TV show or whatever. And it absolutely diminishes the truth about what the military and the government has been proven to have done. Not even crazy conspiracy theories. I'm talking about the fact that the CIA really injected LSD, really undertook experimentations on their own scientists, which ultimately led to the death of Dr. Frank Olson, one of their own CIA personnel officers that was involved with MKUltra. That's all real. Like, there's nothing crazy or made up or dramatized about that. That's really crazy stuff. It really is, but it's true. And I think that that's what keeps my curiosity piqued about all of this, is that aside from the dramatization of Hollywood and stuff like that, when you look at the real documents and you look at what they've done in the past, I've learned this time and time again, that history tends to repeat itself. And you can prove it in quite a few different ways. When you look at government documents, that research done in the 50s, 60s, and 70s is kind of repeating itself with a different shroud over it in 2000, 2010, and into 2020. And so, again, history tends to repeat itself, but you just put it under a different shroud. And I think that is something that society largely is not paying attention to, but it is the scary reality of what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Kevin, do you have a follow-up question?
No, that was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, and that kind of leads us to even, I still believe this experimentation is going on. I mean, I talk to target individuals quite often, and the ones that seem to be credible show me evidence. And it's fascinating. It's hard to prove the evidence oftentimes, but I've seen unbelievable things.
Yeah, and we know that it's going on even with through the Freedom of Information Act. The Department of Energy has multiple human experimentation projects, of which the details are not known. And I've got quite a few open FOIA requests for this. And I believe it was Stephen Aftergood, who was part of the Federation of American Scientists, or FAS, that should get the credit for initially getting, this form out a couple years ago. But it proved beyond any doubt that the Department of Energy, just singling them out, one that you actually wouldn't think is doing this, has human experimentation going on with multiple people with various risk levels as well. So when you look at this and you see that Department of Energy is doing it, well, you could probably make a comfortable bet that so are some of these other agencies that have done it in the past that actually would benefit more from human experimentation. And now I'm not trying to beat a dead horse or anything, but DARPA is, again, one of the prime examples where some of this, I don't want to call it mind control experimentation, but absolutely call it human trials of connecting the brain to computers and how computers can actually control it. Yeah, that's scary. I mean, that's really terrifying.
You know, to add to that, I think even Department of Energy come into this as well, guys, because it was their the head of the Department of Energy was on the Chelsea Handler show on Netflix, and it was around the time when Stranger Things was out, and obviously they're central to the story there. It's all about interdimensional this and that, but they asked him, and he actually turned around and he said, well, in reality, we do work in other dimensions. So it shows you how the Department of Energy, on the face of it, you wouldn't think they're into experimentation or interdimensional stuff, but they really have got their fingers in many a pie.
Yeah, and it's not stopping.
No,
I mean they're pushing the envelope of science and even fringe elements and pushing it as far as they can legally go. I think is a safe bet. And a lot of times they will disguise it as doing good, like working with wounded veterans and trying to allow them to, if they lost a limb, to be able to interface their brain with an artificial limb and be able to control it just like a normal, arm or a leg or whatever. That sounds great, and it is. I fully support our wounded veterans and getting them the help and doing the research to allow them to get back to as much of a normal life as they can. So I support that. But you have to look at what's underneath it, because when the Department of Defense, which is connected to DARPA, is involved in that, as happy as it makes us feel that we are helping wounded veterans and those with disabilities and so on, but that's just the surface, because that they are looking for other ways to interface your brain, the human brain, with computer interfaces and computer chips and artificial intelligence. And that is a terrifying combination when you start adding artificial intelligence into the mix. And that is not crazy sci-fi Armageddon speak. That is actually a terrifying part of all of this that I think that governments are getting into, private sectors are getting into, and I think we got to be real careful, because I think we're getting into territory that can be absolutely devastating for society. And the military keeps pushing it, private sector keeps pushing it, and sometimes vice versa. Another interesting thing to watch is how the military shells out contracts to the private sector. And so that way they can kind of achieve what they want in the private sector. And then that way there's a little bit less oversight that they're kind of shelling this out into a corporation or whatever. And that's something very interesting to watch to see how they do that as well.
Yeah, we're coming up to a break here. It is interesting. And even DARPA on the front page of DARPA, I believe, on the homepage, I should say, they're talking about having mobility with the arm and bypassing the neural pathways directly to the brain. And that's on the website of DARPA. So it really is frightening. It's scary. And then maybe we can get into Google. Google has really got its we'll be right back, guys. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back. I'm here with John Greenewald Jr. He's the creator of the Black Vault, and I'm also here with Kev Baker from the Kev Baker Show here on TFR. So we were having a topic, we were discussing DARPA. We're just having really fascinating conversations. And for all you listeners out there, I mean, this is worth your while. And he has hard evidence on his website. So you can always refer to these documents as evidence and proof. So it's not just a bunch of hearsay, because I do think it's difficult when you're online trying to find information. Anybody can put up a website and state claims, but this is proof. So I highly suggest it. Again, you need to get over there. And also, he's writing a book, or actually he wrote a book, and it's coming out very soon. John, would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So the book that I'm coming out with actually just in a couple days. Originally, it was April 15th, but they moved it up a week. The reaction from the general public has been fantastic. And the book title is Inside the Black Vault, The Government's UFO Secrets Revealed. Now, obviously, I focus in on the UFO topic with this, which is my passion, has been my passion since day one. And to be honest, it seems like the audiences and the general public's reaction and the reaction is that that's their favorite as well, because it's always been one of the most popular topics on the blackvault.com. And so I was asked to write this book about a little over a year ago. And it is a culmination of 22 years worth of research into UFOs. And I kind of take the reader on a journey. It is, nonfiction. It's not fictionalized at all. And I take people on a journey with me as I kind of went through the years tackling all of these various government agencies, CIA, NSA, DIA, DOD. I mean, you name the three-letter acronym, I went after them. And I just explore some of the best evidence and then give everyone an expose on what's really out there, because it varies dramatically against what you are led to believe. So the government says one thing. I talked about it earlier, called the company line. Their company line is that they're not interested in UFOs. They had their investigation. They did their due diligence, and there was two things they concluded. They're not connected to extraterrestrials, and they're not a threat to national security. Now, even though you're not going to find a government document that says, yes, they're aliens, what I do is I give you all of the overwhelming evidence to show there is absolutely a threat to national security. So that's not even a debate. I mean, you can read these documents. These UFO encounters were happening over our most sensitive airspaces, not just in the 50s, but well into the decades that followed. So this was a very real phenomena. But in addition to that, I showed irrefutably that the government was still covering it up. Irrefutably that it is classified at the highest levels, meaning top secret, and irrefutably, in my opinion anyway, irrefutably that these are not government aircraft or top secret projects, because that I think is a very common, and it's not wrong to have that reaction, but a very common reaction to these top secret documents is, well, of course they're top secret because they're talking about the SR-71 and the B-2 stealth bomber and so on and so forth. And so what I do in the book is tackle all of those potential explanations and show why they're not true. And I, get the reader to accept that not only are these documents real, but the cases are real, and they irrefutably display technology that we don't have. And one of the other fun things that I did in the book was I took the government documents, declassified government documents, and showed the technical capability of what these UFOs were. Not because I guessed it, but because the military told me, well, this was flying this fast and was able to do this maneuver and so on and so forth. And I focused in one particular example on speed. And a UFO that was confirmed visually and on radar was like literally about 25 years more advanced than humans. And what I mean by that is we did not break those speed records for about 20 to 25 years after this UFO was able to achieve such speeds. And no, we can't argue that the government was doing these types of tests because they weren't. There was nothing that we have seen throughout this time frame that would be able to account for this. And that was a lot of fun for me to kind of show, like, look, this is real. It's on radar. It's seen visually. Pilots are confused, but we have now the luxury of having decades since some of these cases happened. And now we have a different look on what technology was there and what possible explanations. Still to this day, in 2019, we can't explain these cases. And so I dug into the Guinness Book of World Records and showed what the fastest aircraft was and so on and so forth. And it's an amazing look at the fact that UFOs are not only real, but it is quite possible that being connected to extraterrestrials or a much more advanced civilization, whatever that means, that possibility is very, very real. And that's what I tackled towards the end of the book to show why that seems so real to me.
You know, sometimes I wonder the missing link in humans, if that's the missing link, some kind of connection to these extraterrestrials, something like us. But, you know, that's just things. I think of all kinds of things.
Yeah. Well, it's not.
Ideas.
Yeah, it's not wrong to think that. That's a popular theory. I would the only reason that I would say it this way is that I would argue the point only because we have to give humans credit for the achievements that they've been able to overcome in the last quite a few thousand years. And so I never want to say, well, I can't figure out how they built the pyramids, so aliens did it. And I don't want to say that that's what you were saying, but that is kind of a public perception now with the popularity of Ancient Aliens and on the History Channel and a couple other series and very popular books, that if science can't explain it, it has to be aliens. And that's not necessarily true. I mean, humans.
It's kind of like the pagans. Oh, it's raining. There's these storms and our crops aren't growing because the gods. So yeah, I understand that. There's always that when people can't explain something, they need something. That's the human beings. Human beings need a reason or an excuse or an answer to their questions.
That's right. They can't have a mystery. And I think that's human nature. I'm not harping on anybody, but it's human nature to make up the middle. If you have the beginning, if you have the end. We know the pyramids didn't start with the beginning of the planet, and we know they were built. Well, what happened in the middle? Well, how did they get built? Well, I'm not sure. So let's just say that's aliens. That sounds cool. And we can't really do that. We can't be so definitive. Is it possible? Yeah, maybe. But humankind is a very amazing species. I mean, I don't want to seem like I'm being cheesy and saying hurrah for humans, but I'm kind of saying hurrah for humans. You know, I think we've achieved some amazing things, so we have to give ourselves credit. But in the same respect, when you look at these documents and they are far above and beyond where human nature is, then you have to start scratching your heads that military pilots are seeing technology that we just don't have. Because if I'm not diminishing UFO witnesses, but let's just say Farmer Bob in the middle of Kansas sees a streaking light across the sky, you have a couple very plausible options: a meteorite, a top secret aircraft, a flight, even a commercial airliner, and he's not used to seeing it. You know, there's quite a few things. It changes the ball game a little bit when the CIA has top secret documents about UFOs that they cannot identify. And then when you add on the fact that those documents shouldn't even exist because that company line says, hey, we don't have any interest in this. We did the investigation in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and we just don't care. And you're seeing top secret documents from the 70s and beyond. All of a sudden, it starts to make you think a little bit like, hey, wait a minute. You know, why are they so adamant about denying interest? To me, UFOs would be a whole lot less interesting if the government just said, we investigate these things. We don't know. We've explained all the ones we've looked at. but we're taking it seriously because, it's your lives and our national security at risk. It would be a heck of a lot easier for them to just do that and let it go. But in reality, they are so adamant about denying interest in this. The company line is full of holes. When they try and tell you some kind of historical breakdown about UFOs and their involvement and so on, it's completely full of holes and not factual. Prime example was the beginning of my book. Roswell's very overdone, so let me preface it by saying that. But I deal with Roswell in the most recent explanation of Roswell. And I just did it in the first chapter, but that's part of the company line. They always fall back to, there's these allegations that an alien crash saucer occurred in 1947, but we investigated it and it's not. And, here's our reason why. But they don't advertise the fact that they've given you 4 reasons on what it was, all of which differ. So they've changed their story 4 times. So what I do is I use the most recent that they have given, and I use the bullet points that they use to explain Roswell. And you can destroy each and every one with known history and government documents. So it's like, how much research did they really do? Because nothing can match up. They tried to explain bodies in 1947 that were the aliens that were seen by multiple witnesses as aircraft accidents that happened 9 and 12 years later. How is that possible? Like, how can you say that in 1947, the bodies that were seen were pilots that had died 9 and 12 years later? That's how ludicrous it is. It sounds like I'm kind of making it up. It's all documented. Like, that was what they tried to explain it as. And not a whole lot of people are asking, well, wait a minute, how did you get time traveling pilots that were killed or injured in these incidents that traveled back in time to 1947? How is that possible? Well, of course, they don't have an answer for that, but that is the most recent answer. So I just destroy that company line on what they want to tell you and what they want you to believe. And I only use their own documents to disprove it. No whistleblowers, no leaked documents, no conjecture. I just use their own records that they gave me through the Freedom of Information Act. And to be honest with you, it's a fascinating story because when I finally put it all together in a book, I don't think even I realized like how damning it is to say that there is a cover-up and there's a lot of evidence of it. It is a pretty damning piece of evidence because there's a lot of it.
See, this is why it's a real honor for me to be speaking with you today, because the UFO topic, one of my favorites. I love to get into it on the show. And I'm usually one of the guys, John, that says, we have to be very careful because we don't know if it's our own technology, i.e. black projects, or if it's otherworldly. And that's why it's so great to speak to you, because you've literally looked at the documentation. You have proven beyond doubt that some of these things certainly not our technology. And all of us have this thirst for information because it's a lack of knowledge, because we don't get told anything by the government.
Right.
So let's take you back to 2016, December 2016, and the mass media event that surrounded the announcement of the ATIP, the Advanced Aviation Threat Identity Program, because for many out there, like myself and you, who would love some kind of air quotes disclosure, this was the big thing. The Pentagon were coming forward. They're telling us about all these crafts. And then, well, what's your take on this? Because I'm not so confident that this is the disclosure moment we've all been waiting.
No, just a minor correction. December of 2017, when that had been revealed. Yeah. And I'll be honest with you, I was fascinated by it. My initial reaction was not skepticism. In October, when To the Stars Academy had their press conference. Now, this is an organization led by rock star Tom DeLonge, and kind of a weird figurehead that came into the UFO field and was really interested for many years, and he launched this campaign. Well, part of this campaign and this organization was Mr. Luis Elizondo, who claimed he was the head of this UFO research program. And he didn't say UFOs, he called it unidentified aerial phenomena, UAPs. They're trying to, in my opinion, reinvent an acronym, which works just fine. But that being said, put a fancier term on it. And yeah, you're right. There was a media avalanche of publicity, Pentagon secret UFO study, and this and that. And given my background and interest, I was all over. I loved it. My initial reaction was, this is cool. Didn't really lean towards the disclosure. I think the public thought, like, this is it. They're going to come clean. I didn't lean towards that. I just thought, like, this is going to be great. This is more evidence to show that cover up and more evidence to show an interest. So I was all over it. And as the weeks and months passed, as I started making phone calls, I work as a television producer and was working on a project at the time and was working with the public affairs office inside the Pentagon about a development project I was working on. And of course, I had a personal interest, don't get me wrong, but I can't just because I'm curious call the public affairs office. I do have to separate my personal work with my professional work as a producer. But this was working on a project, so I was able to call them and work with them. And all of a sudden, the story was a lot different. It was, I'm paraphrasing, but the ATIP program was embellished. It was not a UFO program. As the months went on, it was determined that it was actually a different program that started in 2008. The media reports were talking about 2007 start date. And there were all these red flags about not making sense. And so literally up until last week, I had been privately making a timeline of what this secret, quote unquote, secret Pentagon UFO study really was and how it unfolded from what the media reported 2007 through 2012 when they said it closed. But then Mr. Elizondo said that it went on to present day to at least 2017. To his credit, he said he had no idea what happened after he retired. And I made this timeline based on everything that we have heard. And I'm here to tell you, it's impossible to make. And the reason is everybody's changing their story or has a different version of the story or is reporting a different story. And I primarily focused on non-government statements because I know the government is not always truthful. And so people were chastising me. Well, why are you so skeptical about it? This guy is saying it. Well, that's great. But I mean, I kind of need some evidence to go along with it. And again, I'm summarizing like 18 months worth of research here. But the bottom line was it wasn't just the government that was contradicting this story. Those within the To the Stars Academy that were directly involved with the project were heavily contradicting each other. But no one was really following it in that regard, which I was surprised. And so I made this timeline, and all I did was source it to them. I didn't make up anything, no opinions, no nothing. I just made a timeline with all their statements, and it's a mess. It really is. Maybe there's easy explanations. I'm not sure. But to go back to your question, I mean, I hate to blow away the story in the sense that it just doesn't seem credible right now. But unfortunately, right now, there are more questions than answers. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Ella, thank you for that.
Sorry, it took me a second to get to the mute button there.
That's okay.
So what about other projects? I know that you have made documentaries. I went online and saw some really interesting documentaries, and I'm going to watch some of those this weekend if I can get my hands on them. How can people see your films? And maybe you want to talk about your films just briefly so people know what to look for and what the content is.
Yeah, I've had a lot of fun. I started in television more than 10 years ago, and I was doing more on-camera stuff for History Channel and Discovery Channel, and just fell in love with the way television was made and started creating shows. We sold a couple to History Channel that were part of the UFO Files series. So I started with UFOs. Obviously, that was my strong suit, but branched off into quite a few other projects that were so amazing to work on. History Channel's The Universe. I did one of the episodes for that. It was all about a scientific look. So not UFOs or aliens, but a scientific look at what an alien would actually look like, given, again, those scientific variables with heavier gravity, lighter gravity, different planets, and so on. That was intense. I mean, I think I got my PhD in astrophysics and astrobiology in like 8 days. I mean, it was insane to make a show like that because I don't have those degrees, and to work with the Dr. Michio Kaku and Dr. Seth Shostak and create these programs that were not just for History Channel, but quite a few others, was awesome. And it was an honor for me to be involved. So some of them still air. Some of them have run their course. They've got other shows now. But yeah, if you go to like IMDb, just search my name, you'll see a list of documentaries. And I know that people have put them on YouTube. I don't think that that's completely kosher, but people have, archived them on YouTube, and there's various places to find them. So it's fun for me because I have this kind of public image in the sense that I'm running the blackvault.com and I'm putting these documents online and so on. But there's a lot of work behind the scenes of me being able to take part in these documentaries and stuff that air on various networks. And it's a lot of fun for me.
What about future projects? Do you have anything in the works? What do you foresee yourself doing in the next 10 years? Just to continue on and gathering more information to share with the public?
Yeah, it's definitely gather more information, share with the public. As you mentioned in the beginning of the show, I've got over 2 million pages now of various declassified documents and public records that were obtained under the Freedom of Information Act. And all of that is free. So I want to, continue that. In regards to television, to be honest with you, I've kind of taken a little bit of a break from it. I still do a lot of on-camera stuff, but don't produce as much anymore because I started a business which is away from the Black Vault, which is kind of taken off, which is a good thing, good problem to have. And so I've been focusing on that. It's a strong 70-hour-a-week job with with a 5-year-old and a 5-month-old on top of it. So it's a little
you have
challenging.
Your hands full.
That's definitely hands full. But I love it though. I love working for myself. It was always my dream, and so I miss television right now. The creative juice, is not there in regards to making television, writing television. But that's okay. I love doing what I do. And on top of that, it paves the way for me to focus on the Black Vault a little bit. Obviously, was able to write the book that's coming out this week. And I might have some exciting news about maybe another one coming out very shortly. So, yeah, I mean, sometimes you got to sacrifice one thing for another, but it's a good problem to have.
Mm-hmm. Kevin, do you have any closing questions?
No, I just want to thank you for all the information that I've been able to use over the years on my own show, and I've certainly learned a lot thanks to the hard work you've put in, man. It's quite surreal to be here speaking to you, John, honestly.
Well, I appreciate that. I really do. And I've always loved that feedback from the audience because you never know, is anybody reading the documents, and I know they are, but it's always good to hear. I really do appreciate that.
So we still have a few more minutes. What do you foresee happening? I'm a little concerned about the censorship that's going on online through Google. And what's your view on that? Because that's very concerning to us because I've got demonetized because of my content. Some things disappear. They take videos down. It's getting very scary. And these algorithms that they use, which are little robots practically, and they look for keywords, is flagging these. And it's out of context. So it's an issue.
I agree with you, and I'm very concerned. I have struggled, for those who follow me on social network platforms. Lately, it's been with Facebook, and I kid you not, there was a post 6 years ago. As much as I love government secrets and so on, I try and be very much a realist about all of it. Mm-hmm. And this is a show in itself, so I mean, no offense to anybody listening, but I don't buy the whole false flag, Sandy Hook, mass shooting. These school shootings are false flags. I believe that they're tragedies that really happened. So I made a post like over 6 years ago, and I spoke out against those conspiracy theories. And 6 years later, this was about a month and a half ago, they tagged the post because it had an image of, I think, a crowd of people or somebody that was involved. But it had nothing to do with the content. I mean, I was speaking out against conspiracy theories that
Isn't
they are
crazy?
Damaging. Yeah, so I got banned, right? So I got temporarily banned. I got my account reinstated. Fast forward another week or two, they had banned me a second time for this time a longer period of time for the same exact post that they had already removed. So
it's nuts.
And so I tried to fight it. And it's like, you cannot contact the company. They're just too big for humans, I mean, you're just not cool enough.
That's a perfect example of how the algorithm just can't discriminate. It can't tell what context the keywords are used in because
exactly.
You've mentioned the Sandy Hook, you've mentioned the fake, you've mentioned the conspiracy, and it can't possibly discern whether that's you speaking out against it or promoting it. So that's a really good example of how this thing, it just has no human qualities. It just sees the words and you're gone.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I don't mind that automation. Like
We just have
you
one
know,
more minute, guys.
no, I got you. I'll make it quick. I don't mind that automation, but you should at least allow somebody to plead their case and say, hey guys, revisit this. I'm on your side that I'm speaking out against it. And I sent screenshots. I posted them on Twitter. They got quite a few retweets because I sent screenshots when you do try to appeal it. Their form didn't even work. And so I sent screenshots, tagged Facebook. I'm like, hey guys, this is ridiculous. And sadly, you can't contact them. And so I had to sit through the ban.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully it won't happen again, but
I know this is a big concern, and hopefully we'll figure out some ways to combat it. Anyway, so I just want you to share your links. How can they get your book, your website once more? It's I'll just say it's theblackvault.com. And I like the fringe tab. I think that's my favorite one. And so go ahead. I'm going to turn it over to you and share whatever links, Facebook, Twitter, whatever you'd like to do. And then Kev, I'll let you share your info too.
I appreciate that. So real quickly, you said it, theblackvault.com. That is the main site. That'll branch you into the 2 million documents and so on. Yeah, that fringe tab will get you into some of the fun stuff, fringe science, fringe like paranormal, FBI files on spontaneous human combustion. I mean, there's all sorts of crazy fringe stuff. To order the book is inside theblackvault.com. So that is dedicated just to the book. And you can get some feedback on some of the pre-reviews that came in from George Norrie, Nick Pope, Kevin Randall, a couple others on there that saw advanced copies and made some very, very nice statements about it. So you can kind of get an idea of what everyone is saying. So you can order it inside the Black Vault. And, of course, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all of the bookstores.
Okay, we're out, guys. Don't forget to subscribe. Go ahead and hit subscribe on TFR under my name, and we'll be back next week. Thank you. Want to go ahead and share your info?